So when you went to downtown Pittsburgh to go Christmas shopping, you went to, so what was the department store? Kaufman's? Horns? Gimbel's. Exactly. And where were they located relative to each other? Kaufman's was at the corner of Smithfield, 5th and Forbes. Gimbel's was at the other end of Smithfield, and Horns was at the other end of 5th and Forbes. So you had that L-shaped retail district that went right through Market Square. And so you would go from one department store to the next and get a slice of pizza in between, or maybe drop off your shoes at some other specialty shop along the way. And that's how the downtown retail district was assembled. Now, come along the 60s and 70s, we got automobiles, and the downtown retail district went to the shopping malls. How are the shopping malls assembled? Exactly the same way. The shopping malls aren't new, they're a redux. They're a redux of a pedestrian-oriented downtown. So what else do we have downtown? We have a financial district, and the financial district is anchored by banks. Exactly, is anchored by banks, and the banks have invested in their own buildings. But first, you have a standalone bank that looks kind of bankish, and then you build a larger building and rent out floors, and then you build skyscrapers. And many of these were built by banking institutions. So, in the financial district, we see skyscrapers and bank buildings. We have in the downtown areas an entertainment district. And the entertainment district is anchored by theaters. Exactly right, which is why they sometimes refer to it as the theater district. So we have theaters and restaurants, bars and nightclubs in that district of the city. Well, Indiana is big enough to have all of these functions, but small enough that they're all in one district, Philly Street. Philly Street. So we have to, when we understand that the nature of a large city and its component parts and districts, we understand Philadelphia Street because it's all of those districts on one street. And so we can see aspects of this. That when it comes to the retail district, this is 7th and Philly is the center of the retail district. This was our anchor department store. This was Brody's, and everybody remembers Brody's, who was here at least to 1987 when it finally shut down. So that Brody's was established here, sort of anchoring right here, the 7th and Philadelphia retail district. There was, at the end of this block, was a Troutman's. A long time ago, it used to be here at the end of the block. Yes, it was in the last building. The last building at the end of the block, here, we'll take a look at it later. It is the Pita Pit, right. And at the top of the Pita Pit, it has a name at the top, and it's Rose. Yes, and that's the Rose building. And Rose was a Jewish merchant who opened up the department store that he started here. In this building, the Elks building. This is that brownstone building with 1907 on top of it. The Elks built that building, and the Bonton opened up in the bottom floor. And the Bonton was opened up by S.W. Rose. S.W. Rose moved it over to this building, and then he moved out, and Troutman's moved in, and then in the 30s, Troutman's built their building down here. So we're flanked by these department stores. We had the major department stores, Brody's, the local merchants, Troutman's, which eventually moves down there. And then we have, in between the major department stores, the junior department stores. We know them by another name, the Five and Dimes. And so then we had the Five and Dimes filling out the retail district. This one was what one? This was McCrory's. And that over there, which is now the atrium, G.C. Murphy. And so we had McCrory's and G.C. Murphy right across from each other, all the way up until 1938. The Indiana Players was Woolworth. And Woolworth moved out to Wayne Avenue, to a store on Wayne Avenue, and J.C. Penney's moved in. So that J.C. Penney's was over there. And then next to the Indiana Theater on the right side, if you remember, Sears was in there. It was a little Sears. And this is how the downtown retail district was assembled all the way up until the opening of the Regency Mall in the early 70s, and then the opening up of the Indiana Mall in 1981, and then bit by bit, most of these stores either closed Brody's closed in '87, or they moved out to these shopping districts. Most of these people were Jewish. And Indiana's Jewish community, you can understand the Jews of Indiana through 3 generations, and the first 2 generations are merchants, and the last generation are professionals. The Jews come into Indiana like many small towns across America, and especially in the coal fields. It was the Jewish merchants who usually brought retailing into the coal district, and they come in with peddler wagons and selling junk and going door to door. And then eventually these peddlers established downtown department stores or clothing stores or shoe stores. And then the second generation, this is the 1900s, 19-teens, when most of these stores are established, and they're all established by Jews. The Brodys were Jewish, Rose was Jewish, Rob Shoes was Jewish, Waxler's were Jewish, Luxembourg's were Jewish. And their names are written in the buildings. These are almost like living tombstones. The names are the names of the building are their names. And the pride in the building and the establishment and the store is their pride. And their name is on the building. Now, of course, the name is all on tombstones out at the cemetery, but this is before that. You can recreate the families that built downtown Indiana by just going to the cemetery. And finding where all of them inevitably, like all of us, end up. But some of their names are still here as well as a memorial to the time before they died. So that we have this foundation, whereas the 3rd generation Jewish merchants, most of these, by this time, shopping malls are being built. And chain stores are being constructed, and the money isn't really to be made in these downtown department stores. It's the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, and most of the children of the merchants here get out of the business and become professionals, lawyers or accountants or something else. And then we kind of lose that sense of sort of the Jewish merchant in a town that isn't necessarily all that Jewish. It says something about the timing of all of this when we find the date to their synagogue. Where's the Jewish synagogue in Indiana?
It's on 5th Street.
Right across from Horace Mann, 1953. And that's right about in the middle of the 2 generations of merchants and that 3rd generation that became professionals. G.C. Murphy and John McCrory, I guess John McCrory, they're cousins. So that eventually we have G.C. Murphy marks all over the place, and eventually we have McCrory's all over the place. They were cousins. And they were cousins who grew up in Indiana County. They grew up in Brush Valley. They grew up in Brush Valley. McCrory started out in the stores in Johnstown, and eventually came up with the idea of this discount sort of junior department store, and then he eventually opens up this store in Indiana. G.C. Murphy worked for him and said, I get the idea, I can open up my own store. And eventually in the 20s, he opens up his own store right across the street. So this is about 1917 when it opened up, and that was in the 1920s when that opened up. Of course, the buildings don't reflect this anymore, because the building said G.C. Murphy is gone, the McCrory's are gone. And other uses have gone into those buildings, and they've been remodeled and updated to reflect different time periods. This is one of the early postmodern structures, the atrium. The atrium has sort of like this faux, kind of semicircular peak at the top, and that's harking back to an historical reference to this Palladian architecture of the Renaissance. But what is its purpose? It doesn't have a purpose. It's just to make the building look cool circa 1982. But nonetheless, that's when it was when the atrium was redesigned. When you go into the atrium, it kind of looks like what? A shopping mall, right? That's the competition. Now you go into the atrium. What happens first? You have a choice: stay upstairs or go downstairs.
Or same floor.
Stay upstairs or go downstairs. The downstairs. I mean, who doesn't remember these junior department stores, these 5 and dime bargain basements The bargain basement, and how did you get to the bargain basement? You couldn't miss it. You went right to the front door, and the steps went down a hole. And there was a big sign that said bargain basement downstairs. And when you go into the atrium, nothing about it says G.C. Murphy, but those steps are still there, and you still go down in that building in the same exact ways as you used to. Now, this building here, we can at the front of it is what we could call colonial revival. That this is another Renaissance.